peace and a sense of freedom I hadn't known I was missing. When I first met Alex at a crowded finance conference, it wasn't exactly love at first sight. We bumped into each other, coffee in hand, both of us running late for the same session. "Watch it," I snapped, as a bit of my coffee splashed over the rim. "Sorry about that," Alex shot back, not missing a beat. "Guess we're both trying to cram knowledge in at the last minute, huh?" Despite the rocky start, we found ourselves laughing about it later. Turns out, we had a lot in common, especially our drive for success and independence. After dating for a year, filled with heated debates and passionate makeups, we decided to take the plunge and get married. But not in the traditional sense. We both loved our jobs. I was climbing the ladder in financial accounting, and he was making waves in sales. So, we laid it all out, blunt and straightforward. "Screw traditional," Alex said one evening, his eyes serious for once. "Let's not be one of those couples who end up fighting over money." I nodded. "Yeah, let's do a prenup. Keep what's yours, I'll keep what's mine. If things go south, we walk away clean." The decision to sign a prenuptial agreement was less about distrust and more about mutual respect for our hard-earned careers. We didn't want the potential mess of untangling assets if things didn't work out. Plus, it felt good knowing we'd both entered the marriage as equals. Splitting the bills was a no-brainer. 50-50, Alex agreed. And no whining about who spends more on groceries. I laughed at that. "Deal, but you're not getting out of housework." "I'm not your maid." "Fair enough," he conceded. "But I don't do windows." That's how we started our married life, on a foundation of honesty, equality, and a touch of humor. We opened a joint account, strictly for shared expenses, rent, utilities, and those occasional fancy dinners to celebrate our wins. It was a system that worked perfectly for us, allowing us to maintain our financial independence while building a life together. Our biggest achievement came when we finally saved enough to buy an apartment right in the city center. It was a dream come true. The day we got the keys, we stood in the empty living room, surrounded by boxes and painting supplies, both of us grinning like idiots. "Look at this place," I said, spreading my arms wide. "Our very own piece of the concrete jungle." Alex wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. "It's perfect. Just needs a bit of paint and maybe some of those fancy curtains you like." I leaned back into him, feeling the warmth of his body. "We did it, babe. 50-50, all the way." "Yeah," he whispered, kissing the side of my head. "Our perfect little empire." That apartment wasn't just a home, it was a symbol of our partnership, our commitment to walking side by side as equals. We were thrilled, basking in the glow of our joint achievement, blissfully unaware of the challenges that lay ahead. But in that moment, everything felt possible. We had each other, and that was all that mattered. Life with Alex started off on cloud nine. We were the perfect team, or so I thought. We were both climbing our career ladders, supporting each other, or at least that was the plan. Things started changing when Alex's mom, Mrs. Thompson, began dropping by more often. I never really clicked with her. She had this old-school vibe about women's roles, and me working full-time didn't sit well with her. One evening, as I was slogging through spreadsheets, Alex and his mom were in the living room, whispering. I could hear bits and pieces, her voice sharper than a knife's edge. I finally took a break and walked in, just in time to hear Mrs. Thompson say, "Emma's always buried in her work. Doesn't she know a wife should care for her husband?" Alex, bless him, tried to play peacemaker. "Mom, things are different now. Emma's job is important to her, and it helps us out a lot." But Mrs. Thompson wouldn't have it. "Back in my day, we knew our priorities. Your wife should be at home, making sure you're looked after, not glued to a computer screen." I couldn't bite my tongue any longer. "Mrs. Thompson, I respect your views, but times have changed. I'm not just going to sit at home." Alex and I agreed on this lifestyle before we got married. Alex chimed in, trying to smooth things over. Yeah, Mom, we're doing things differently. We're partners in everything. Mrs. Thompson scoffed. Partners? A woman's place is in the home, not competing with men. Look at your sister, a proper woman, caring for her family. That hit a nerve. Being a proper woman doesn't mean giving up on my career or ambitions. I shot back, my patience wearing thin. The conversation ended with Mrs. Thompson huffing. Well, I just hope you know what you're doing. A family needs more than money. After she left, Alex and I had a heart-to-heart. Babe, you know I'm on your side, right? He said, taking my hands in his. My mom's from a different time. We'll do things our way. I nodded, wanting to believe him. I know, Alex. But it's not just about your mom. It's about us sticking to our guns, making sure we're on the same page. He hugged me. Always, Em. We're in this together. But that conversation with Mrs. Thompson was just the start. Her visits became more frequent, her comments more pointed. And each time, Alex's assurances seemed to lose a bit of their strength. I started to feel like I was on my own, defending our choices, our lifestyle. It wasn't long before this tension spilled over into other parts of our life. The apartment that had been our happy place, our sanctuary in the city center, started to feel less like home. We were thrilled when we bought it, our own little slice of the city. It was supposed to be our fortress against the world, but instead, it began to feel like a battleground for old versus new, tradition versus ambition. Our happy acquisition was turning into a reminder of the growing divide between us, a divide that seemed to widen with every visit from Mrs. Thompson and every silent dinner that followed. Our home, once filled with laughter and plans for the future, now echoed with the unspoken tensions of a partnership strained by external pressures and unmet expectations. The days turned into a pattern I couldn't ignore. I kept the pace at work, juggling numbers and deadlines like a pro, all for the sake of our future. Alex, on the other hand, started showing up home way earlier than usual. At first, I thought it was a temporary thing, but then the pattern stuck. The joint account, once buzzing with regular deposits from both of us, began to feel the absence of his contributions. And then, they stopped altogether. One evening, I decided it was time to address the elephant in the room. Alex, we need to talk about the joint account. What's going on? I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. He sighed, a bit too heavily. Babe, sales have been in the dumps. I'm not making as much as before. It's a tough time at work. I wasn't panicking, we had savings, and my job was stable. Okay, I get that. Things are rough everywhere. But since you're home early now, maybe you could help out more around here? I suggested, hoping he'd see the logic. Alex, sprawled on the sofa, phone in hand, didn't even bother looking up. Help out? Like how? I was flabbergasted. You know, household stuff. Cooking, cleaning. We're a team, right? He finally looked at me, his expression a mix of disbelief and annoyance. Emma, come on. You know that stuff's your department. I've got enough on my plate. My jaw dropped. My department? What century are you living in, Alex? I'm working just as hard, if not harder. I thought we agreed to share responsibilities. He shrugged, his attention already drifting back to his phone. That's different. You're better at it, anyway. That hit me like a slap. I was counting on an equal partnership, not this outdated script he was suddenly following. I can't believe what I'm hearing. Is this really how you see our marriage? Alex let out a frustrated sigh. Why are you making such a big deal out of this? It's just how things are. Just how things are? I repeated, my voice rising. No, Alex. That's not how we agreed to things. I'm out there busting my ass every day, same as you, or at least I thought so. And then I come home to a second shift, because you've decided you're too good for woman's work? He didn't respond, just kept his eyes on his phone, and that silence said everything. I was seething, hurt, and suddenly very alone in what I thought was a partnership. This wasn't the deal. This wasn't the man I thought I married. We were supposed to be equals, but here I was, feeling like I'd somehow been demoted in my own home. The morning sun barely crept through the curtains when I realized the alarm hadn't gone off. In a frenzy, I scrambled out of bed, my heart racing against the clock. Alex, ever so calm, was sprawled on the couch, his eyes glued to his phone, seemingly oblivious to the chaos. "Alex," I pleaded, half-dressed and struggling to find my other shoe. "I'm running late, and it's going to be a marathon day at work. Can you please handle dinner tonight?" My voice was a mix of hope and desperation, clinging to the slim chance he'd step up. He spared me a brief glance, his attention tethered to the screen. Yeah, he mumbled, a non-committal grunt that did little to assure me. "Got it, dinner. Sure." I paused, the knot in my stomach tightening. "You mean it, right?" Because last time, the memory of coming home to an empty table flashed in my mind, a silent testament to forgotten promises. Alex's annoyance was palpable as he cut me off. I said yes, didn't I? "Go on, don't worry about it." His dismissive wave was the final nudge out the door, leaving me to rush into the day with a heavy heart. The hours at work were a blur, each task piling atop the next, leaving no room for breath or thought. By the time evening wrapped its fingers around the city, I was spent, my body and mind crying for respite. The thought of coming home to a warm meal offered a glimmer of comfort in the exhausting routine my life had become. But the apartment greeted me with silence, an eerie echo of my solitude. The kitchen, untouched, bore no signs of a meal prepared, the table as barren as it had been that morning. Confusion gave way to a sinking realization as I noted Alex's absence. With a trembling hand, I dialed his number, each ring a beat in the mounting dread. His voice, slurred and distant, pierced the quiet. "Yeah? Where are you?" "I thought you were going to handle dinner," I managed, my voice a mix of frustration and disappointment. His laugh, a sound I once adored, now felt like a sharp jab. "Nah, decided to crash at my sister's. You know, where a real dinner happens. Not like our place, eh?" The word stung, a cruel reminder of the chasm between us. So, my working late to support us makes our home less of a home? Is that it, Alex? My voice cracked, the hurt spilling over. "Look, Emma, it's not just about dinner. It's about feeling appreciated, you know? Like someone actually cares I'm there." His words, thick with accusations and alcohol, laid bare the fissures in our marriage. The line went dead, but the silence that followed was anything but peaceful. I stood in the middle of our kitchen, a room that once felt like the heart of our home, now just a hollow space. The tears came then, unbidden and relentless, mourning not just a missed meal, but the love and partnership I thought we had. The tension between Alex and me had been simmering just below the surface, but the events of the past few weeks had turned up the heat, threatening to boil over at any moment. The day it all came to a head was like any other, with the weight of unresolved grievances hanging heavy in the air. I had just walked in from another grueling day at work, my mind a whirlwind of numbers and deadlines, when I noticed the mail scattered on the kitchen counter. Among the usual bills and flyers, a statement from our joint account caught my eye. The balance was far lower than it should have been. Heart pounding, I rifled through the transactions, my confusion turning to disbelief and then to anger as one entry stood out, a large withdrawal made by Alex. "Alex!" I called out, my voice sharper than I intended. He emerged from the living room, phone in hand, a look of feigned innocence plastered on his face. "What's up?" he asked, trying to keep his tone light. I slammed the statement on the counter, pointing at the damning entry. "What is this? Why did you take out so much money without talking to me first?" He shrugged, a casual dismissal that fueled my frustration. "Oh, that. Just had to cover some expenses, you know how it is." "Expenses?" I echoed, incredulous. "For what? And why didn't you discuss it with me?" He sighed, the facade of nonchalance slipping. Look, Emma, I needed a new car. The old one's been acting up, and I got a good deal on this one. A new car? With our savings? I was struggling to keep my voice steady, the betrayal stinging more than the financial loss. We're supposed to be saving for our future, not squandering it on impulsive buys. Alex's patience was wearing thin. Impulsive? I think I deserve a little something for myself, don't you? It's not like I'm asking for much. Not asking for much? I could hardly believe what I was hearing. You're making decisions with our money, our future, without even a thought for me. Where's the partnership in that? The room charged with tension, our frustrations boiling over into a heated argument that left us both spent and angry. The distance between us felt insurmountable, the divide widened by every harsh word and accusation. As we stood there, the air thick with unsaid things, the phone rang, slicing through the silence like a knife. I answered, my voice raw from shouting. It was Mrs. Thompson, her tone sharp and accusing from the get-go. Emma, what's this I hear about you denying Alex a simple pleasure? A man works hard, he deserves to enjoy the fruits of his labor. I was stunned into silence for a moment, disbelief giving way to anger. Mrs. Thompson, with all due respect, this is between me and Alex. And for the record, he didn't work hard for this. It was our savings, for our future. Her scoff was audible, dripping with disdain. You young people and your future. A good wife supports her husband's decisions, not questions them. In that moment, I knew something had to change. But whether we could bridge the gap between us, or if it was too late for repairs, only time would tell. What was clear, however, was that the path ahead would be anything but easy. Life has a way of throwing surprises at you when you least expect them. Just when I thought things couldn't get more complicated, I received a letter that knocked the wind out of me. My great-uncle, a man of few words and solitary habits, had passed away. I hadn't seen him in years, and our interactions were nothing more than occasional, awkward conversations during the rare family gatherings. Yet, here I was, holding a letter from a lawyer, telling me he had left me everything he owned. His entire estate, his savings, everything was now mine. It was surreal, to say the least. I remember staring at that letter, the words blurring as a mix of emotions washed over me. Sadness, confusion, and a creeping sense of responsibility I wasn't sure I was ready for. And then there was Alex. His reaction to the news was like he'd hit the jackpot. Babe, do you realize what this means? We're set, he exclaimed, his eyes lighting up with a mixture of excitement and, dare I say, greed that I hadn't seen in him before. A week has passed, and I returned home tired after another crazy day at work. What I saw shocked me. There, in the midst of what should have been an ordinary evening, was my husband, Alex, beaming like he'd won the lottery, surrounded by his family, all of them basking in the glow of my great-uncle's unexpected generosity. Look who's finally home! Alex exclaimed, thrusting a glass of champagne into my hands, his excitement palpable. We're celebrating your big windfall, babe. The sight of the lavish spread from the city's priciest restaurant laid out on our table, and the merriment in their eyes, felt jarringly out of place. My mind raced, trying to piece together the surreal scene before me. Quit my job today, Alex announced proudly, as if he'd just made the most normal decision in the world. Why work when we've got this fortune, right? His grin widened, oblivious to the shock that must have been written all over my face. His parents, his sister, her husband, their kids, all were there, acting as if they'd just won the jackpot. And then, as if on cue, Alex added, "Oh, and before you join us, the dishes won't wash themselves, you know?" Laughter erupted from the crowd, a chorus of approval at his joke. But to me, it sounded like nails on a chalkboard. Fury coursed through me, hot and unstoppable. Here I was, after a day of grueling work, expected to play the maid at my own celebration? It was madness. I was on the brink of unleashing a torrent of anger, ready to set things straight, when Mrs. Thompson, ever the matriarch, called for a serious conversation. Dragging myself to the armchair, every ounce of my being screamed in protest. What could she possibly say that would make any of this better? My mind was a whirlwind of indignation and disbelief. Were they really so oblivious to the audacity of their actions? Did they see me as nothing more than a benefactor for their whims? As the absurd proposal hung in the air, courtesy of my mother-in-law, suggesting we use my inheritance to build a colossal house for what felt like the entire clan, I could only stare in disbelief. The idea that not only would we all live together, but that this would somehow excuse the entire family from ever working again, was ludicrous. Alex, beaming as if he'd just unveiled the master plan of the century, chimed in. Think about it, babe. We'd never have to worry about anything ever again. The room was filled with nods and murmurs of agreement, as if they'd all been let in on the plan before this moment. As I looked around at these people, my supposed family, I felt more like an outsider than ever. Breaking the celebratory bubble with a voice steadier than I felt, I said, I'm filing for divorce. The room fell silent, the air thick enough to cut with a knife. Alex's smile faltered, his parents' jaws dropped, and his sister's glass of champagne paused midway to her lips. My mother-in-law, always quick on her feet, laughed dismissively. Oh, darling, even if you do, the law's on our side. Alex gets half of everything you've got. Her smug assurance was the last straw. Actually, I countered, a bitter laugh escaping me. Our prenup says otherwise. Alex gets nothing of mine if we divorce. The shock that rippled through the room was palpable, their wide eyes meeting my firm gaze. And another thing, I continued, my voice gaining strength. I'll be taking all the furniture, every appliance, everything I paid for. And Alex, you'll be hearing from my lawyer about the unpaid bills and expenses you've conveniently ignored. The fantasy bubble they'd been living in burst right then and there. One by one, I watched as their faces fell, the realization that their free ride was over dawning on them. Without another word, I ushered them towards the door, their protests and pleas falling on deaf ears. As the door closed behind the last of them, the silence that enveloped the apartment was suffocating. Yet, beneath it all, a sense of relief began to wash over me. I was free from the expectations, the manipulations, and the sheer audacity of a family that saw me not as a person, but as a means to an end. After the dust settled on the courtroom battles and the ink dried on the divorce papers, I started anew in the house my great-uncle left me. It was a fresh start, a chance to rebuild my life on my terms, free from the constraints of a marriage that had become suffocating. Alex, now living with his parents, found himself grappling with the realities of a day-to-day life that required him to work, really work, for the first time in a long while. Every so often, he'd call me, his voice tinged with a desperation I hadn't heard before. Come on, can't we just wipe the slate clean and start over? He'd plead, the echoes of his once confident demeanor replaced by uncertainty. His mother, too, took to calling me, her tone uncharacteristically sweet, a stark contrast to the sharpness I'd grown accustomed to. Dear, wouldn't you reconsider? For the family's sake? She'd coo, as if the words could erase the past and mend what had been broken. Each time, I couldn't help but laugh, a sound of freedom and relief. No, thank you. I'd reply, my voice steady and sure. I'm quite happy with where I am now. And happy I was. With the chains of a loveless marriage behind me, I found joy in the simple things. I traveled, exploring corners of the world I'd only dreamed of seeing. I threw myself into charity work, finding fulfillment in helping those in need, both people and pets alike. The gratitude in their eyes, the genuine smiles, and wagging tails brought a sense of purpose back into my life, a reminder that there was so much good I could do, so much love I could give, without expecting anything in return. The liberation from my old life, from the expectations and demands of others, allowed me to rediscover myself. I was no longer defined by my relationship with Alex or his family. I was my own person, complete and content in my independence. The house my great-uncle left me became more than just a place to live, it was a sanctuary, a space where I could grow, heal, and thrive. It was here, among the memories of a man who had quietly supported me from afar, that I built a life filled with passion, purpose, and peace. As I look back on the journey that brought me here, from the turmoil and strife to the calm and contentment, I'm reminded of the resilience of the human spirit. Life, with all its twists and turns, had led me to this moment of liberation, a testament to the strength within me and the promise of